much for joining and for being here today. My name is Mr. Amer Azalan bin Abdul Jamal. Right, and I'm one of the lecturer in the Faculty of Business, Economics and Accountancy. I'm teaching finance and banking. A bit of introduction about myself, before we start. Right, I've been working here since 2008, doing some teachings and research activities and some community programs as well. At the moment, I'm just like you guys. I'm a PhD researcher. Okay. Inshallah, soon I will go for my Viva Voce. So please pray for me. I'm doing my PhD with University of Birmingham, UK. And this is my thesis of the title of my thesis. We're doing something on financial literacy and financial behavior using experimental design. So if you ask me, my background is more or less quantitative methods. Previously, I used to do a lot of surveys, survey questionnaire. Until recently, when I start doing my PhD, I'm starting to look at experimental research, which is quite interesting as well. Okay. Currently, I'm the associate for the Center of Household Assets and Saving Management in Birmingham. And my research area, those of financial literacy, financial management, financial education, and bits of behavioral finance. And like the other members, it's part of the job as well to do a research. And these are some of my research activities where you can find on Google Scholar. Right. So if you just type, if you're working on something on consumer finance, financial inclusion, corporate finance, or financial literacy, perhaps we can have a collaboration in the future. Okay, how many participants do we have here so far? Berapa sudah? Okay. So it's about a pilot study. Okay. Right. What is pilot study before we go further? Okay, so it is basically a small scale study, in which we conduct in order to test whatever we have plans and the methods that we have proposed earlier for the main stage study. So before we go to the big stage, to the actual research, we have to test our plan. We have to test the instruments. We have to test whether the design is appropriate and feasible to be conducted for the actual study. So since the name is a small scale study, therefore it doesn't require a large number of samples. Okay. So there's a lot of definitions about pilot study where you can find in the article journals. Okay. One of it is an experimental, exploratory, is a test, it's a preliminary, it's a trial, or a try-out investigation. It's a testing stage lah, okay, to test whether these items can be used or not. This set of questionnaire design can be used for your survey or not, okay, to test whether the length of the questionnaire, is it too lengthy or not, okay, because you can't just simply go out there and ask people questions without checking in terms of the items that you measure, without checking further the length of your questionnaire. Okay, sometimes your respondents might get fed up, okay, answering your questions. Why? Because it's too long. I have experienced this before, okay, whereby at the earlier part of the questionnaire, the respondents answered quite consistently. Okay, we can track the trend of the answers until when they move to this second and third section. Okay, then we started to identify the answers which are quite unreliable. Okay, we know the trend. Okay, from from having a consistent, from having a mixture answers, okay, towards most consistent answer 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5 until the end. Okay, so it is a signal given by your respondents that they probably tired, you know, answering your questions, which can be too lengthy. So it's all about, end of the day, it's all about getting a high quality of outcomes. That is the main objective of our research, isn't it? Of course, at the end of the day, we want our results, okay, with a good set of quality kind of results, okay, reliable in terms of the items measurement, all right, and the process of conducting the research is clear from A to Z. Okay, so to obtain these high quality outcomes, a good research study with relevant design and accurate performance is required. Okay, therefore, analyzing its feasibility prior to performing the main study can be very beneficial for this purpose. Okay, the issue is that pilot study, okay, is not conducted, okay, in some of the research among researchers. Okay, some researchers, they neglected pilot study and they just go straight to the main stage study, which doesn't actually follow the right procedures. Okay, so and also sometimes pilot study are not being reported in the articles and journals, which again did not follow the procedures in conducting a research. Okay, for postgraduate students, it is appropriate, okay, and it is considered a must for all of you, including me, to conduct a pilot study before we move on to the next stage, which is the main stage study. So why do we have to conduct a pilot study? Okay. So it is used to guide the planning of a large-scale investigation, because we, as the researcher, we adopt, we come up with our conceptual framework from adopting various theories, isn't it? We have quite a few theories and we combine together and we develop into one conceptual framework, all right? And this combination of theories and later on you develop into a framework is your contribution of your research, and this contribution of research must be tested, okay, before you go for the main stage study, all right? So to assess feasibility, so as to avoid potentially disastrous consequences of embarking on a large study, which could potentially drown the whole research effort, right? So feasibility, the issue on feasibility that might be addressed in a pilot study includes the availability of subjects, estimating the recruitment time of subjects, how the investigation is conducted, and the cost of study. So it comprises the whole process. And we know that in doing research, it depends on your objective and on your design. Okay. Some researchers, they have different design. For example, researcher A doing experimental research, researcher B doing qualitative research, researcher C doing mixed method research. So different design have different methods and procedures, right? And although we have different methods and procedures, it must be tested in the first place, okay? Whether you are doing full quantitative or qualitative or mixed method, okay? We are all the same. This is to avoid the drowning stage later, okay, which might affect the whole research effort. Recently, all right, our group research just conducted a pilot study, all right, and we found out that one of the item measurement is not fit to be used for the main stage study. So can you imagine if we just go through the real study using that items which doesn't seem fit to be tested, obviously it will affect the end results and the outcome, and your outcome, okay, cannot be accepted, right? So, but if you just go and proceed with the analysis and publish your paper, that means you are giving false information to your audience, to the readers. Fine. So we don't want that to happen. All right. So pilot studies are of crucial importance when planning studies with sensitive or not easily accessed populations. You have the opportunity here to develop or refine your sampling methods. Sometimes when we do pilot study, all right, we come up with one sampling methods, and then once we've done with the pilot study, from there we can find and identify the problems that occurred during the data collection stage. So most likely you found out that, oh, this sampling method is not suitable and it's not appropriate to be used for my research. So then you will report that further, and then you can suggest a new sampling method. So that's the purpose. That's why we have to conduct a pilot study. Okay, it gives you the opportunity to refine whatever you have planned before. Okay, and to evaluate the representativeness of a sample as well. Okay, sometimes we probably chose the wrong sample or the population. Okay, which doesn't match with the objective. So again, this is the use of pilot study. It allows you to what do you call that? To refine your samples as well. Okay, and also to design a new instrument. Pilot work also allows the development or refinement of data collection instruments. Okay, like for your case, your questionnaire. Okay, most of you, I think, are doing quantitative surveys, and some might doing mixed methods or full qualitative methods. Nonetheless, you guys are using instruments, isn't it? Which is your questionnaire survey. Okay, and this questionnaire survey needs to be assessed and evaluated and tested. Okay, so by doing a pilot study, you have the options whether to include the questions or not, okay, based on the analysis that you will conduct after you have done the pilot study. So the performance of instruments with a particular sample under specific conditions also can be evaluated in the pilot project. Right? Now, I think what people confuse between pilot study and pre-test, okay? Pre-test versus pilot test. Okay, this has been a lot of confusing lah, especially among the postgraduate students. Now, before you go with pilot test, you will have to do pre-test first. Okay, the first thing before we do pilot test is to do pre-test. So the procedure is first to do a pre-test, second is to do a pilot test, and the third one is the actual study or the actual test. Okay, so pre-test, what is that? Okay, if you quoting from Hagen, 1987, he says that questionnaires may have to be designed with only a modicum of knowledge about the subject. In these circumstances, mistakes are bound to occur unless the questionnaire is tested. So the purpose of pre-test is to get the expert to evaluate your measurement items. Okay, because the respondents, the target population or the samples, they don't evaluate your item measurement. Okay, so you will do that in the pre-testing stage, right? So pre-test needs to be conducted before pilot test. So the only instance where skipping this stage, okay, and it's a must, okay, it's a must. It's a procedure that you have to go through at the initial stage before you go to the actual data. The only way you can skip this stage is when conducting the pre-test would adversely affect the final experiment of the study. Meaning to say that if you conduct this pre-test, then it might affect the sample of a population. For example, okay, in a situation where you have a very small sample size, and that sample, if you conduct a pre-test, then you might lose them for whatever situation lah. Okay, that's the only way you can skip the pre-test stage. But other than that, it's a must and it's a compulsory stage where you have to go through before you go with the pilot and the main stage study. So pre-test basically is a validation process with the experts in which they will evaluate and give feedbacks on measurement items that will be used for the research. Okay, when you talk about experts, these are the experts within your area of study. And in the pre-testing stage, a number of samples is not an issue before the actual study. So we don't talk about how many samples do we need for pre-test. No, we only have to identify those people who are expert within our field and get them to evaluate our measurement items. And this can be done face to face, or considering this pandemic, the alternative is that you can do via online or via emails and stuff. So this can be done on individual basis or group, or in terms of in focus group. Okay, so let's say, for example, you want to have some expert to validate your questionnaire. So you identify probably around 3 or 4 experts within your area of study. Like, for example, like my area, financial management. So I probably identify one expert from Malaysia on financial management, another expert from other countries, and provided that these are the key figures lah, and much better that these people are the key figures within the area of your research. Okay. Like for my PhD, I was able to get around 3 expertise within my field of study to validate my questionnaire and the items that I use for my survey, right? But if you do a focus group, you can do that as well. Put them into groups when involving a lot of people. The idea is to get them to review each of the measurement items and ask them if there is any issues or problem encountered when reading the questionnaire or the design of your work, right? At the end of the section, you should provide the comment section in the questionnaire, which to be filled by the experts. So because they are the one who will comment, isn't it? They will evaluate and give comments and ideas or suggestions for improvement. So the comment section needs to provide it either at the end of the questionnaire or after each of the questions. So it's up to you. So the reason to do pre-testing is to know how each items are well understood objectively by the readers, aka the experts, and also to check if instructions are well understood, instructions to answer the questionnaire. Okay, also instructions that you gave to the readers, okay, before they are starting to answer the questionnaire. Some of the procedures when doing a pre-test, okay, involving expert verification, referring to content validity. So we get an expert, okay, to give comments and suggestions in terms of the content itself. Okay, this content maksudnya memang he's the one who is expert on the area of the research, right? For example, for my study on financial behavior and also financial literacy, so I get one figure that expert in this area, and they comments, okay, and they give comments on the questions that I asked pertaining to financial behavior and financial literacy, and whether these items, okay, should be asked in the questions or not, or should be removed or not. Okay, that is on content validity. And then next we have a face validity in terms of the language, okay, linguistic, because different researchers, okay, came from different countries. Some of you might adapt okay, questionnaire from prior research. So prior research, they use English, but for your context in your own country, the use of English language might not be preferable, okay, by your respondents, isn't it? So you might need to translate the language from English to other language, okay, in your native language lah, in Bahasa or in Mandarin or any other language. So if your questionnaire involve different set of language, therefore you have to get, okay, again, an expert within your field, but he can check, okay, the language of the question that you ask, okay. So this is what we call phrase validity, right? And then the third one is on criterion validity in terms of the measurements, okay, whether the items is fit or not, or can be used, okay, in the questionnaire design or not, okay. Criterion validity ni ada banyak jenis lah, okay, a lot of types in criterion validity. A lot of aspects you can look at, including the perspective of analyzing your data and stuff. So you can read further on these three aspects from this paper, right, from Tahadus 2016, to further understand, okay, what does these three means to you. So basically, pre-testing is just involving the three procedures above and no data involved. We don't ask them to answer our questionnaire. No. We ask them to review our questionnaire and read and comment if the questions are suitable to be asked to our respondents. So no data involved. So what we need from pre-testing is the comments from experts on the extent that they understood the questionnaire. This includes those who are doing a full qualitative methods. For example, if you do interview, doesn't matter whether you are using structured or semi-structured questionnaire interview, it has to go through the same process as well. So get the expert within your field to review your questionnaire, okay, and give comments. Are we good so far? Semua okay ke?
Ya, alhamdulillah. Okay.
Sekejap boleh minum sekejap kah? You may interrupt if you suddenly have questions pop up in your mind. Boleh mencela sekiranya ada soalan. No problem. Okay. These are some of the fundamental issues when doing pre-testing. One of the issue is what's the specific items that should be pre-tested. All right. So basically, in a questionnaire survey, okay, we can split into two main areas. Number one is to pre-test the individual questionnaire. Okay, let's say you have 20 questionnaires, so we test one by one each of the question. Okay, ask the expert, please read this 1, 2, 3 question until 20 and give comments. What do you think about this question and stuff, right? So that is what we meant by pre-testing individual question. Number two, pre-testing the overall design of the survey questionnaire. Okay, in terms of the length, in terms of the language, in terms of the formatting, the signposting, okay, because sometimes researchers, they just simply create and write questionnaire without testing it first, and they just assume, oh, I understand my questionnaire, so the readers should understand as well. No, it's a big no, okay, because you are the researcher. Of course, you know what you are doing, but you have to imagine, okay, you are the reader, all right? So the readers might not understand what you are trying to ask. The problem with some researchers is that they just simply put the questions without a proper signposting. For example, they ask few questions on financial literacy, okay, but that question is actually parked under behavior. So it creates a lot of confusion among the readers or the respondents when answering the question. So you don't have a proper signposting and a very, hair-wired kind of formatting. So these two things are the two areas that normally that we have to go through when we do pre-testing. Now, when we talk about individual question, there are some areas of concern when we do pre-testing. Okay, when experts are doing a pre-testing, for example, double questions. All right, we sometimes tend to ask the respondents, okay, two questions in one sentence. So two questions to which the respondent is asked to provide a single answer. That is what we call as double question. For example, do you believe in God and church? So it's a combination of two questions where you ask them to provide a single question. This is one of the issues that normally being raised, okay, among the experts when they pre-testing a questionnaire. All right, it shouldn't happen. Okay, double-barrel question and stuff. And secondly, in terms of the necessity and relevance of the question itself, some questions are quite sensitive, irrelevant to be asked. Okay, in the questionnaire. Right? And then some questions can be difficult to be answered by respondents as well. Okay, because it's normal sometimes, because we are the researcher, we know what we are doing. All right, we know about the research, and we want to ask somebody who is not well versed like we have, like we do. Okay, so sometimes we tend to create a question in which the level is too difficult for them to understand, right? Especially this happens quite a lot when we ask questions on the respondents' punya level of financial literacy, okay, whether they are financially literate or not. So when we ask the question, of course, we know all the answers from level 1, 2, 3 until 5. So level 5 is the most difficult questions, but we think that the question is easy to us, okay? But to them, it's too difficult to answer, all right? How can you ask questions about investment market to those poor people living in the rural area? It's not relevant. That's one example, okay? So you have to, this expert will go through this process in terms of assessing the level of difficulty of the questions, whether it's too difficult or not, okay, to be asked to the targeted respondents, whether it is suitable to be asked or not to your targeted respondents. Normally, if you ask questions in terms of knowledge, normally it depends on the types of respondents, isn't it? So the level of difficulty also must be considered as well. Ambiguous words of meaning, sometimes when we ask questions, okay, it creates a lot of confusions. We understand because we are the ones who we are the researchers, so we understand the question. But other people, when they read it makes them confused. So that is why we need the experts to review the questions. And then some questions, they have a missing response categories, okay, not enough answer categories lah. For example, for instance, you ask, in your opinion, who is going to win the general election in the PRU 15? A, A, UMNO. B, PAS. You bagi A and B saja, kan? Padahal there's a lot of political party in Malaysia, kan? We have DAP, Amanah dan sebagainya. Sini maksud lah, contoh, missing response category. Contoh, tadi soalan tu contoh saja. Okay, missing response category. Ini selalu juga terjadi. Okay, apa ni? Where researchers they forgotten to put this response category. And worst thing is that some of the questions are missing as well. Okay, ada juga case di mana missing questions. Right, so these are some of the fundamental issues when we do pre-testings, and these are the issues raised by the experts when they review the questionnaires. And in terms of the overall design, right, pre-testing, the overall design should cover the length, okay, not too long, not too short, okay. that is the role of the experts lah. They are the one who will review whether your questionnaire is too lengthy or not, or it's too short or not, or you should add more questions so that it can match and answer your objective. Okay, should cover the layout. Okay, the use of colors. Okay, the font size, the font color and stuff. Okay, the format of the questions used. The number of lines to leave for replies. Some researcher, they ask quite a challenging question, but they only left 2 lines for the respondents to answer. Okay? Supposedly, you should leave at least 10 lines lah for them to give a brief complete answers kan. But you only provide them few lines saja to give your answers. That can affect your outcomes as well. Okay, nanti you punya outcomes akan jadi too brief lah kan. It's not detailed because you don't allow them to express their feedbacks. Okay, because of the shortage in terms of the lines there. Okay, nampak benda kecil kan? It looks like a very small matter, but it does matter. And the sequencing of the question is very, very important. You cannot simply just put cut and paste questions without properly putting into teams, okay, or in sequence. And this should be done in the pre-testing as well. So basically, when you approach the experts, you have to make sure that first you have the question ready. Number 2, you have to make sure that it is being designed in an appropriate manner, okay? And then we get them to review, okay? Now, another issue when doing pre-testing is on what method should be used to conduct the pre-test. As I mentioned earlier, this can be done face-to-face, or you can do online, okay? The academia often discuss, okay, some of the methods that are mostly used are personal interviews, right? It's a face-to-face lah, one-on-one interview. Sometimes they do telephone interviews, and some researcher they do mail self-report. So this depends on your objective and depends on your situation. Okay, like our situation right now, the pandemic, most likely it's difficult for us to do a personal interview. Okay, especially when you are located in a different countries. So you might want to use other methods such as telephone interviews and mail self-report. And of course, these 3 methods have differences. Okay, for example, Boyd, they suggest that the best method is obviously the personal interviews. Why? Because it gives the opportunity to the interviewer to notice reactions, because we do face-to-face, kan? So by doing face-to-face, we can see their reaction when they give feedback and comments to our questionnaire design. Okay, we can see clearly their hesitations. Okay, when they critique our item measurements and other cues by the respondents that could not be obtained by telephone or mail. So if you do telephone, you can just speak to them, but you cannot see the actual reaction. Ini berkaitan dengan psikologi sikit lah, betul tak? Okay, so that is why some academics, they prefer personal interviews. Then if you cannot do personal interviews, then maybe you can do telephone conversation, or you can do mail, right? Like my situation when I did my PhD, when I tried to contact the experts, some of them, most of them are in Malaysia, and some of them are from Indonesia. So obviously I was in the UK at that time. So obviously it's costly for me to travel a lot waktu itu. So I was not able to do personal interviews. So what I did was I contact them via telephone, okay, and some of them I contact via mail self-report. So I email them. Of course, firstly, I approach them, I introduce myself, okay, and get the approval. And once they approve, then I send them, I mail them my questionnaire and the design of my work together with the feedback form, right? And I gave them few weeks as a deadline for them to review. And then a few weeks later, they reply back and give their feedbacks and suggestion. So you can do that as well. So at least once you get the feedback from the experts, you feel the confidence about your research. Kan barulah kita yakin yang mana our research ni betul-betul properly conducted. Okay, that is on pre-testing. Do you have any questions so far on pre-testing? Morning SN. Okay, do we still need to do pre-test even though the questionnaire adapted or adopted from other literatures? Yes. Yes, SN. Okay, it is recommended. It is recommended, okay, to do pre-testing even though it was adapted and adopted from prior research, because we adopted from many resources. Okay, some researcher, they adopted the questions from 10 different set of questionnaire from the past research. Kan? 2 questions from questionnaire 1, 5 questions from questionnaire 2, So you compile together and come up with your own set of questionnaire. And some of these questions were tested before. Some of them were not tested before. So yes, it is highly recommended, okay, for you as a postgraduate student to pre-testing your questionnaire as well. Okay. Yes, as mentioned by Dr. Izianti, it helps you to fine-tune your study as well. All right, we move on to pilot tests. As I mentioned earlier, okay, after we've done with the pre-testing stage, then we get the feedback from our experts. Yay, we have settled the first stage. Then, of course, you have to report that. It's good to report the pre-test outcomes in your dissertation or your thesis, okay? Because it will show the examiner that you really, okay, make sure that your measurements are the item measurements that you use, okay, are properly checked and used for your research. Okay, so this creates the confidence among the examiners about the research that you conducted. Okay, after that, then we can start doing the pilot tests. As I mentioned earlier, what is a pilot test? It's a small scale research, normally involving 30 or more samples. This is where we involve the real samples of our population. Okay, we don't involve the expert anymore, but this is where we involve the real people. Okay, the real samples of our research. All right, so if your sample are university students, for example, so in pilot test you should use university student as your sample. You cannot use your mom or your dad, okay, or your uncles, okay, who are not university student. Okay, you cannot simply ask anyone to be your respondent for your pilot test, because pilot test reflects or mirror your actual study, right? So pilot test is conducted after pre-test is conducted. The purpose, again, to obtain the estimated reliability value of the items or the constructs that you use. Okay, let's say you use 5 independent variables and 1 dependent variables. Okay, we want to test whether these items, okay, are fit to be tested or not. Whether these items have a reliable value, okay, to be tested and fit for your framework or not. Okay. Number 2 is to identify the problematic items which might require researchers' attention. Believe me, when you do pilot study, you will go through, okay, you will see there will be some issues that might arise, okay, when you conduct a pilot study. Like my experience before, when I did my pilot study for my PhD work, using experimental design, I encountered a lot of problems and issues, okay, from many aspects, not just the questions, okay, but also from the procedures of conducting the experiment from A to Z, from recruiting my samples, from giving instruction to my samples, okay, getting them to receive my intervention, and many others lah, banyak, okay. So, but it allows me to be aware of these problems and make improvement, okay, for my actual work. And from pilot study, it really helps me a lot, okay, to improve my sampling method, to improve my sample size, to improve my design, to improve my experiment procedures and stuff, okay. So it allows researcher to identify recruitment rate appropriately as well, okay. Sometimes we tend to miscalculate our number of sample size, okay. So from doing a pilot test, then it helps us to appropriately calculate what actually, how many sample size do we actually need for the real study, all right. And also it offers you to have the idea whether the intervention, okay, should be accepted or not. This is normally in trial research lah. Trial research ni where you have your intervention, kan, you test the intervention whether the intervention works or not. It might not be useful lah for some of you who are doing survey research, okay. Macam kalau intervention ni contoh macam those who are doing medical research, kan, they want to test whether this medicine works or not. So they will do pilot dulu, and from the pilot test it will determine whether this medicine can be accepted or can be used for final project for final study or not. Okay. I think intervention from your case as a students who are doing full correlation study, this intervention referring to your item measurements, the variables that you propose, kan, from the theory that you derive from, whether your variables too can be accepted or not, it can be used or fit to be used in your framework or not. So we test that in the pilot test. And then the purpose again, other purpose is to check if randomization procedures are well conducted, okay, and to obtain required preliminary data for the calculation of sample size for the primary outcomes. Okay, common misconceptions on pilot tests. Okay, number one, researchers have the strong desire to include the data collected from pilot study into the main study, because this allows the researcher to reduce both the number of participants required for the study and the duration of the study. Okay, so can we use the data from pilot into the main study or not? What do you think? Before I give you the answer, what do you think? Let's say you have conducted your pilot study, okay, and it's time for you to conduct the main study. Can you use the data that you have in your main study?
No.
All right. So no, okay. But this is again something which is debatable in the academia. Okay, some says yes, some says no. Okay, the no, you should not use your pilot results in your main stage study if your pilot results consist of too many problems. Okay, in terms of the items that use. Okay, in terms of the analysis, most of the items are not reliable. Okay, if you have issues when conducting the factor analysis, then it should not be included in the main stage study or in the real study. Okay. But the pilot results can be used, okay, in the event where you use the same methods and procedures and there's no issues at all in your pilot study, which is rarely happen, okay. But if that happens to you, if your pilot is smooth sailing, okay, no issues in terms of reliability of your data, in terms of the factor analysis and other stuff, then you can consider using your pilot results in your actual study. So from there, you can save samples lah, kan? You don't have to recruit a lot of more samples. Tapi that rarely happens lah. Okay. What we normally advise students to do is to conduct a pilot study and report that pilot study on a separate analysis. And that analysis can be published as well in article journals. Tak ada masalah. Okay. So for the main stage study, use a new set of samples and analysis. Number 2, the primary purpose of pilot study is not hypothesis testing, and therefore sample size is not calculated. An appropriate sample size needs to be determined not for providing appropriate power for hypothesis testing, but to understand the feasibility of participants' recruitment of the study design. To conduct pilot tests, we need to calculate, okay, the number of sample size, all right? Even though we don't do hypothesis testing in pilot tests, but still sample size is required and it matters actually, all right? An appropriate number of sample, it needs to be determined, all right? Again, not for hypothesis testing, but to understand the feasibility of your study, all right? That is the second misconceptions that we need to understand. Number 3, the third common misconception, there is a question of whether the hypothesis can be tested in the analysis of a pilot study. Again, the same with the previous one here. Okay, in pilot study, we don't test hypothesis. We don't test whether variable A is significant with dependent, variable B is significant with dependent. We don't do regression analysis straightforward. No. Okay, but it's a matter of checking whether the research is feasible to be conducted or not. Another misconception, in many cases, pilot studies are conducted to generate data for sample size calculations. This seems especially sensible in situations where there are no data from previous study to inform this process. However, it can be dangerous to use pilot studies to estimate treatment effects, as such estimates may be unrealistic or biased because of the limited sample size. Therefore, if not used cautiously, results of pilot study can be potentially mislead sample size or power calculation. What it means is that, okay, for a research that use treatment or intervention, okay, it is not recommended, okay, to use the results and to conclude that the intervention or treatment works, okay. Like for your case, it is not appropriate, okay, by using your samples, a small sample, it is not appropriate to conclude that variable A influence or significantly influence intention to spend money, for example. Okay, we cannot straight away come up with that conclusion using our pilot results. Why? Again, because pilot result, we don't do hypothesis testing. It is not appropriate, okay, because of the low sample size, and that process has a lot of issues, okay. So that is why it is not appropriate and can be dangerous to use the results to come up with one conclusion to answer your research objectives, okay. The next one is determining sample size for pilot tests. This is among of the popular questions people ask. Okay, how to determine sample size? Well, basically, there's a lot of suggestions from many scholars previously. Depends on your background. Okay, depends whether you are doing social science study or science study. Okay, depends on your design, depends on your objectives. Okay, for example, for social science study, currently suggests that the pilot study sample should be at least 10% of the sample projected for the larger parent study. This is one suggestion. However, another suggestion by Herzog, okay, he cautions that this is not a simple or straightforward issue to resolve because these type of studies are influenced by many factors. So again, depends on your design. Some framework are too big, so 10% of sample might be too much. Okay, it depends on the design as well. Nevertheless, Isaac and Michael suggested between 10 to 30 participants. So this is another suggestion. If you want to consider between 10 to 30, you might, you can do that, okay, by justifying, okay, that Isaac and Michael suggested this number of samples, okay. Hill, 1998, also suggested a similar sample size between 10 to 30 participants for pilots in survey research. Julius suggested in the medical field, normally that involve RCT. Van Bell suggested 12. Trees suggested 10% of the project sample. So this is in social studies lah. Okay, social science study. For pilot trial pula, pilot trial ni yang buat eksperimen lah. Okay, simplest method to apply sample size according to rule of thumb. Okay, there are several methods we can determine your sample size for trial research. Okay, you can do power analysis, you can do confidence interval, or if you think that these two are quite a headache for you to understand, you can use simple size rule of thumb. Okay, like here Brown suggested to use at least 30 subjects or greater to estimate a parameter. Okay, Julia suggests a minimum of sample size of 12. Tira recommended at least 70 in order to reduce the impression around the estimation of standard deviation. So again, it depends on what you are doing. It depends on your design and your framework as well. Okay. So normally, okay, in general for social science, 30 participants is sensible. 30 orang lah untuk pilot kan. For our case lah, normally our students normally are doing a full quantitative survey, kan. Normally 30% is appropriate and acceptable. Okay. And how do we report? What to report in pilot tests? Okay. Again, since pilot testing does not involve hypothesis testing, therefore we don't report any results that answers our research objective. No, we don't talk about achieving our objective yet in pilot tests. Okay. In pilot testing, we just want to report whether the items are reliable or not, whether the items are fit to be used in the framework or not. Okay. So normally, among of the reports that we normally the things that we normally report in pilot tests are those descriptive statistics, which is the background of our sample, okay, in terms of demographics and economic background, and then we conduct the EFA or the exploratory factor analysis for the purpose of validity. This is where a procedure to use to identify, reduce, and organize a large number of questionnaire items into specific construct for independent variable in the study, aka the factor analysis. So if you attend the data analysis punya course, then you will go through this EFA, CFA punya procedures, factor analysis. Okay. In EFA, where you have to do this analysis lah, the KMO index, the Butler's test, okay, factor analysis and stuff. And then some of you might are doing confirmatory factor analysis. Okay, it depends. If the questionnaire has been adopted previously, then you probably can skip EFA and you can straight away do CFA. But then it depends. If the questionnaire mostly adopted from various resources, then you will normally go through the EFA process first, and then you go to CFA lah, pakai SEM kan. And then after you go through CFA, baru you analyze using structured equation modeling to analyze your data. But again, some students, they don't use SEM, they don't use Smart PLS, they just use SPSS. Doesn't matter as long as it answers your research objective. That is what matters. Okay. And then we report the reliability analysis referring to the Cronbach alpha, okay, whether your item measurements are reliable and can be used for the main research or not. Yeah, if you want to know more about this, please attend statistical courses, okay, which I think the postgraduate office, they have the workshop on that. Some frequently asked questions on pilot tests, okay. Can I publish the results of a pilot study? Yes, every attempt should be made to publish. It's a waste if you don't report your pilot test results. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you are a postgraduate student or a lecturer with a grant. It is best to report the outcomes of your pilot study. Okay, because this will allow you to share with your readers what are the problems that you encountered while conducting the study. Okay, and this can be used by other readers as reference to them that they shouldn't be using your methods because of the problem that you encountered during the pilot study. So it is good, okay, to publish or to report your pilot study. And for you as the students of postgraduate, it is recommended, okay, to report your pilot study in your thesis, okay, because this will give more confidence to your examiner reading your thesis. Why is it important to publish the results of pilot study? Again, to provide information about feasibility of the research community, okay, to save resources of being unnecessarily spent on studies that may not be feasible. So we tell people, hey, I tried to conduct this the research using this design, but when I did the pilot study, I encountered a lot of problems. So you shouldn't be doing this design. Probably we need to consider other instruments that might be appropriately can be used for the future research. So this is where you can save a lot of time, you can save a lot of energy and cost, okay, on conducting another study. Can I combine data from a pilot with data from the main study? I think I've answered this before. Yes, provided that the sampling frame and methodologies are the same, and provided that you don't have a lot of issues during your pilot study. How can I use the information from a pilot to estimate the sample size? Okay. Use with caution, as results from pilot studies can potentially mislead sample size calculation. So in terms of sample size, again, from my experience, okay, I determine my sample size for pilot study. And then when I go through the pilot stage, I have problems to get my participants to join my experiment. A lot of my samples, they drop out from the study, okay, because of many factors. Okay, so from there, I lost half of my respondents or my samples for my research. So from there, it helps me to identify what are the problems, number one. Number two, for my actual research, I was able to determine a new proper sample size that I should recruit for the actual study of my work. Okay, so I would say you have to use the information that you receive cautiously, especially in terms of estimating your sample size. Use the suggestions that made by previous callers lah. Okay, you can follow any of these suggestions by the previous researcher, right? As long as you can justify why you chose this number of samples, right? And as long as it matches your research objective. Can I use the results of a pilot study to treat my patient? This is if you're doing experimental research, if you involve treatment, no. Okay, you cannot use the results, okay, to treat your patients. Okay, ini kalau medical people lah kan. For our case, social science studies, the result of our study, we cannot confirm. We cannot say that variable A significantly influence variable B. No, we cannot use that. Okay, because we don't test hypothesis. Okay, it only involves verification on the item measurement saja. So no, it cannot be used. Okay. And I attach here some of the articles that you can refer to, all right, to understand more about a pilot study, okay, and also on determining the sample size, okay. For example, I attach here the paper from Herzog on determining sample size for pilot study, right? Tutorial on pilot studies and many others lah, okay, which I think might be useful for you to prepare for your pilot and data collection stage, right? That is all for me. I open the session for Q&A if you have any. All right, Dr. Izanti asked one question. Is there any possibilities that you have to do more than one time pilot study testing your questions? Well, normally, our normal practice is that normally we do one pilot test saja kan? Unless if your pilot test has a lot of issues. That is where you may want to consider conducting another stage of pilot testing. Okay, but if you don't encounter a lot of issues on pilot testing, issues in terms of not just your items lah, but issues in terms of getting people to answer your questionnaire. Okay, let's say you target earlier 30 participants, but then only 5 answered your questionnaire. So obviously that doesn't answer your objective, isn't it? At least you need to have at least 30 people to answer your questionnaire so that the items can be properly validated. So if you encountered such issues, then maybe you want to consider doing another round of pilot study. Tapi kalau tak ada issue, if you have no issue in terms of getting people to answer 30 samples, and most of your issues are mainly on the item itself, normally the statistics will do the job lah kan. They do the factor analysis, and then that is where you will omit those items which are not fit to your framework. Then that should not be a problem lah. Okay. Any more questions? Especially from those who will soon doing the data collection.
Morning, Mr. Amer. I have 2 questions.
Yeah,
First, okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. My name is Angin Bin. So I'm doing my mixed method study. So basically, as we know, mixed method, first I'm doing qualitative and then quantitative, and I will go to the second phase. So I would like to ask you, do I need to really precise or really detail in terms of pre-testing and pilot study for both stage? Because I'm doing mixed method study. What can you suggest? Thank you.
May I know what is your stage now? Are you about to start doing your data collection?
Yeah, I'm about to do my pre-test for quantitative.
I see. All right. I would suggest you do the pre-testing for both lah, qualitative and quantitative, because both you will use questionnaire kan. For qualitative, what method you will be using? Are you going to do interview?
Yes, I already done my interview and analysis for qualitative.
Okay. So if we based on the procedure kan, if we do pre-testing, this is applied for both lah, qualitative and quantitative. We should pre-test our question first lah. Okay, if we follow the procedure lah, okay, we should send our questions for verification first. Okay, the survey questions and also the questions that you use lah for your interview for pre-testing. All right, and then after you have gone through that, okay, then you can proceed with your pilot test lah for both quali and quanti. So basically the same saja the process.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And another question, Mr. Amer.
Yes.
You did attach few of the reference from, for example, from nursing field, okay, suggest about the how many sample for the pilot study and pre-pilot study lah, basically. So can we use that kind of reference in our social science study to mention that we refer to in the field of nurse punya sample for
nursing.
Yeah, nursing field, because I did see some of your reference from nursing field.
For your sample for quali kah?
Quanti, sorry, quanti. Yeah.
Quanti.
Yeah.
Boleh. Even myself also, I refer a lot to nursing punya articles, journals. Because
Okay.
like my design kan, I'm doing experimental design. Not many research in social sciences doing experimental design.
Yes.
Mostly being conducted on nursing and medical lah.
Yes.
So,
yes. True.
there's not a lot of reference available for social sciences being studies on, especially on experimental design and some other designs lah kan, sebab tak banyak yang buat. So I mostly refer to these journals as well, especially when I want to design my research lah. Okay, the stage from recruitment of the samples and then randomize the samples until the analysis. So there's no issue on that whether it is from sciences or non-sciences, as long as it matches your research objectives. So not a problem, not an issue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Amin.
Okay, no problem.
Habis.
Question from Chi. Hi, sir. The pilot test, do I need to focus on the Chromebox Alpha? Yes, you can. One of the reports that you can include in the pilot study is the result from the Chromebox Alpha, because it will tell the readers whether your items are reliable or not and can be used for the real study or not. Yes, so it's part of the analysis that you need to report.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. And yes, as mentioned by Dr. Juliana, both approaches of mixed method need to undergo pilot study. The procedure still followed the single approach, even though doing a mixed method design. Thank you, Doctor. Any more questions on pilot study or pre-testing? After all, it's between you and your supervisor lah, okay? Some of you might have already done pilot testing without doing a pre-testing. Again, discuss with your supervisor, because they are the one who evaluates and guide you through the whole process. Okay, I'm just telling you what are the procedures that we as a researcher should do. Okay, regardless in what stage are you in now. Okay, if you are about to start your data collection journey, then you may want to start doing a pre-testing before you proceed with pilot. But if you already done pilot testing, about to do main stage study, perhaps you may want to review your results, your pilot result, and discuss with your supervisor whether you should go back to do pre-testing or not, or you should just proceed. Okay. Okay. Do you have any more questions on the topics that we did discuss today? I hope what I'm trying to share with you here, okay, is well understood, and I hope you get something from what I shared today, and I hope that from today's session will help you with your data collection. Okay. So if you have no question to ask for today, it's fine. But if you have question to ask later, you can. You are all welcome to email me at my email address, amer@ums.edu.my. All right, and I wish you guys the very best for your work, and may you have a smooth sailing journey. And to those who are about to start doing the data collection, I wish you guys the very best, and I hope you know, everything is working well for you.
Thank you,
So,
Mr. Amer.
All right, I'll pass over the baton to Dr.
Thank you,
Izianti.
Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amer. Sorry, because I'm actually in another meeting currently. So I would like to wish you a very thank you for your contribution sharing session with the students. I hope the students have a very more clearer path where to go after this. If you are currently doing your pilot testing, or perhaps just have an idea of what to do next for the students in their journey. Thank you so much, Mr. Amer. And we wish you all the best in tak lama lagi in completing your PhD soon, very, very soon. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much. And the others, thank you, everyone. Take care.
Everyone. All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.